Okay, so today we're going to talk about everything spicy. So what do you think about that?
I think I don't like spicy things. Not my favorite subject, but that's where the money's at, apparently.
So the crazy thing here is that Melanie has managed a Mexican restaurant. She lives in South Texas. She grew up around spicy flavors, but you don't like spicy
I
food,
am actually Mexican.
but you don't like spicy food.
Not at all. Not even. No.
Yeah. One thing that happens a lot is that I tend to trick her into trying things. So I'll often used to, when we first started working together, I would do a lot of like, hey, I want you to taste this thing, but she doesn't fall for it anymore. So I think,
No.
so the last thing that we made actually were habanero pecans. And let me just kind of back off and tell you what's going on here. So over the last year, we've introduced a bunch of new products. I mean, we have like 30 SKUs of different products. But routinely what happens is that people come in and although we've had a couple of spicy products, we had spicy brittle, which is made with chili flake. And then we had we have a spicy bonbon, Mexican hot chocolate, very popular, cayenne pepper, cinnamon ganache. But people wanted more spice. And so we started to think about how we could add more spicy products. And so we did a deep dive into kind of trying to figure that out. And I don't know, Melanie, you were no help in helping figure that out.
No, I was more helping just showing you other products that people had already done. We found that green brittle and we found, pan poured different techniques for the same stuff that we make. And so I think we kind of started with what we didn't want to do and what we wanted to improve upon. That's what we've been doing.
Yeah. So we leaned in heavy on brittle. So if you didn't know it or not, although we're Hill Country Chocolate, one of our most popular products is actually brittle. And I don't know if Melanie knows the story or not, but the very first confection that I ever made was actually brittle. And I grew up, I called her a godmother. I think she was just a fancy babysitter, but I had this woman that I grew up with. Her name was Ma. That's what we called her. And she made peanut brittle, and she had no thermometer. She never did any kind of softball stage test and all that. But I can remember, and I still have her original recipe that she wrote in her own handwriting about how she made peanut brittle. So when we opened the chocolate factory, we decided we would make peanut brittle. And then one of our really good friends, Javier Sanchez from Savage Company, he said, you should make it spicy. So we added in chili flake. And I don't know, Melanie, what do you think about that? I think it's been pretty successful.
It's been crazy popular. People definitely, anything with any kind of spice in it, that's what they lean towards.
And one of the problems we had, to be blunt, since we're getting started in this chocolate business in the last couple of years, is we didn't package it well.
No, we did not.
So tell them about all the mistakes we made on packaging brittle.
So packaging brittle started as a nightmare in a little tin square box with a window on the top. Dan's OCD did not allow for any small pieces of brittle to be in there. And I get it. I mean, you don't want it to look dusty in the can. But at the same time, trying to break brittle into the exact size pieces that fit in that tin and have the lid actually close was hard. And that was just the first step of the nightmare of the tin, because then we had to vacuum seal it in those plastic bags. Remember, every time we would run it through the shrink wrap thing, it would develop a hole in the side, and it was horrible.
Yeah, one of the problems when you're a chocolatier is that most chocolatiers have a tad bit of OCD. Sometimes it's pathologic. Ours is a tad bit on the pathology side. So, you don't want your brittle getting sticky. So we put it into these beautiful tins, and then we wanted to seal it. Then we had to have a special machine to seal it. And I remember when we realized we didn't have the right kind of machine to seal it, we had to order one, and it was like $5,000. And of course, the machine gets here, and then we run things through there. And as soon as we do that, it has holes like Swiss cheese. And then we realized that we needed to have that little thing that, you don't eat. It'll kill the desiccant pack, exactly, inside there. And so the desiccant pack, we had to have those. And you may not know this or not, but those desiccant packs are incredibly expensive, right? Because you have to buy them in large quantities. And so we finally did all that. But it was a big pain in the ass, to be blunt. But then we moved on. We moved on from that. We moved on.
Yeah, now we just jam it into a bag and call it a day. And that's a nice big lab of brittle in there, and much easier.
But now people can't see it.
But there's a window in the bag. I mean, I can't get behind the clear bag totally clear bag situation. Doesn't go with our brand.
Yeah, so we're exploring the idea that people want to see their product. And so you can put a picture on the front of the bag or you can put it in a clear bag. Unfortunately, clear bags don't run up against our brand either because they look a tad bit convenience store.
Well, and the picture on the bag is a little too Walgreens. Like you don't want, just a picture of your brittle, what it might maybe look like. You want to see it, but you don't want to see all of it because nobody wants to see all of it.
So lean into that phrase that I use a lot about artisanal.
Your favorite term for describing everything that we make here, anything that your hand touches is artisanal, apparently.
Yeah, I like to think of it. So, I mean, our goal, our niche, if you haven't figured it out at Hill Country Chocolates, we like to take common flavors, things that you've had before. And we always do this exercise like, what would happen if we were to use the best ingredients, the best process, the best nuts, the most OCD confectionery chef trying to put that together. And if you do all that, we call it artisanal, and because it's obviously not done in a big bulk process, but sometimes my staff pushes back a little bit.
Well, yeah, because artisanal has become like, I hope this email finds you well. Same thing. Artisanal yet again.
Yes, that comes, but I have a t-shirt that says Chat GPT of chocolate. I think that's what she's referring to, but it's kind of like a mean thing to say. So anyway, but brittles evolved. And so we launched the spicy brittle. To be honest with you, the spicy brittle was flavored with chili flake. I liked it because it was punchy. It's really clean. It's delicious, but it is to some degree a one-dimensional flavor, right? I mean, it's sweet, and then it's got that spicy element of chili. So you do get the heat from the brittle, but we had numerous requests to make jalapeno brittle. And I think, Melanie, I'd love your thoughts on what we found on when we started to taste hundreds of different jalapeno brittles. Well, I should say I and the staff tasted. You did.
Yeah, it was not me. I just look at it and then tell you that it looks nasty because it's green, like bright electric green. That's not appetizing to me. Then you tried it and said it wasn't actually appetizing. So
yeah. So one of the things we ran into was that the word jalapeno in South Texas has a huge like positive thing. So they'll purchase anything that's got a jalapeno on it. I mean, it's kind of crazy. And so and brittle is the same way, but the brittle that we found, which was really popular, and in fact, we saw it at some major grocery stores, which was even kind of crazier, is that it literally looked like shamrock green. It's like it was that color. And then when we tasted it, it didn't taste good. It tasted really kind of almost artificial to me.
Well, that's because it totally was. I mean, there's people who want to make like a really good confection that you're just going to sit down and eat the whole bag. And then there's people who just say, oh, I'm going to slap jalapeno on here and I'm going to color it green and people are going to buy it. And they do. But I don't know that that necessarily means you have a lot of repeat buyers, especially when there's a better option out there.
Yeah. And I think the other thing too about brittle is that to mass produce brittle, it's actually pretty easy because you basically cook it to a certain temperature.
You say it's easy. It's easy if you have all the right
all the equipment. Yeah, it's all the equipment.
You get a cooling table and a kettle and six hands helping you. Like,
well, now she's leaning in to what we do. Now let me just back off here for a minute. So the way we do brittle is different than most people, and let me kind of tell you that up front. So a lot of times when people make brittle today, particularly the brittle that you buy at the gas station, it's in that bag, that just says jalapeno brittle, and you can see the green stuff in the bag. Many times what's happened is they've made that brittle and they poured it into pans. And they literally have just ladled it into pans, let it firm up. They've broken it and put it in the bag.
Yeah, and you know that because it's really, really thick. It's got that just super thick, even texture to it. And our brittle doesn't have that because of our technique.
Yeah, and the other thing that you'll notice, and it's really evident in like pecan brittles and in other than peanut brittles, is that you're going to notice that the nuts are really small, because if the nuts are large and you try to put it into a pan, it's harder to ladle and hard to get. So anyway, that's kind of how do we do it? We do a little different. So what we do is we make our brittle in small batches. So when I say small, we're still talking like
30 bags.
Yeah, still 100 pounds of it at a time, but still it's a small batch, right? We pour it on a cooling table which is a table that we normally run cold water through, but actually we run warm water through it, which is kind of interesting. So we keep the table pretty warm. And then we spread it all out into a thin layer. And when I say thin layer, it's really pretty thick. It's like about, what do you think, Camille? What do you think? Like,
I don't even know. I'm a woman. I don't judge. I'm not an eighth.
You don't judge size.
My inches are off, I'm sure.
We'll let her keep her vision of what size is. But the point is that we put it pretty thick, actually. And we literally have these huge shears that are like, I call them culinary shears, but I think they're pretty much out of a sewing factory.
They're like Chamber of Commerce ribbon cutting shears.
Yeah, they look like they're out of a Chamber of Commerce for the most part. And so anyway, so what we do is we cut this brittle into big blocks, and it's still hot. I mean, the brittle's probably, it ends in the table at about 295 degrees. And I'm guessing it's still around 225 or something right now. And so we cut it into strips. And by this time it started to get a little firm. And then what we do, and this is so fun to watch if you're at the factory, is we literally pick it up and we throw it over onto a marble table next to it with the top facing down. So the bottom actually is kind of firm, and then we flip it over so that the cooler top is now on the marble table. Yeah. And that's always kind of a fun exercise.
That's where the fun begins, right there. And you have to have extra people around the table to stretch the brittle. And that's what gives it that texture that's not an even thick layer like it looks in a pan. When you just pour it in a pan and let it cool on a rack, we don't do that. We get our hands in it and stretch it all out and make it thinner. Then you're not chewing on a big chunk of thick brittle.
Nice. Yeah, because here's the kicker. Believe it or not, the thinner that you stretch the brittle, the more crispy it's going to be. Because what happens is just chemistry, and this is where the ChatGPT chocolate comes in play. But when you stretch that brittle out, you stretch out those molecules inside that sugar, and it makes them almost like shards. And so it makes it crispy. So you don't have to rely on like chemistry to do it. You can just have physics here. You spread it out on the table, and the thinner we can stretch it before it gets stiff, the thinner and crispier it's going to be. And so it becomes a little bit of a race against time.
It does. And then once you stretch and do all that stuff, you also get to use the word artisanal.
That's actually true. She's making fun of me there, but we do. You can use artisanal at this point. So we make it in small batches. And so that's kind of how it works. You do that over and over and over again. And you get in a rhythm and you get practiced in doing that. But then once you get that process down, you can make spectacular. And so it's allowed us to get really kind of explore things. So let's go back to this jalapeno thing. So when we started looking at these jalapeno brittles, I'm going to be honest with you, they were just disgusting. They were, if anything, they were an abomination to a Texas jalapeno, right? It's like, this is not the flavor that people think of when they think of jalapeno. So we set on this journey. Could we actually make a jalapeno brittle with fresh or real jalapenos? And so that's kind of how it all got
I think
started.
The conversation was one of, what do we do? Do we use fresh jalapenos? Do we use some sort of an oil or a powder? Or, where do you even begin to put something like a real jalapeno in a confection?
Yeah, and honestly, I didn't want it to be green, right? I mean, we clearly were okay if it came out a little bit, had a green, because
we weren't leaning for that like movie prop look though. It was like needs to be edible.
Yeah,
it's to look good.
And that's a little bit of a challenge in actually doing any kind of confection, is because people eat with their eyes, and so if they see something green, they expect it to be jalapeno. So I knew that we needed to have a little bit of a green element in there, but I wanted it to be kind of natural. So we decided we did a bunch of little tests, and we kind of came up with a plan, and this is kind of what we do. So we needed both heat and flavor, but then we also wanted a little bit of kind of an extra care, that artisanal approach. And so, yeah, I know. So we landed on actually candied jalapenos. That's actually what we landed on. So we did two things. We actually used these ground organic powdered jalapenos, basically, so that we can mix it into the brittle really well. And then we leaned in on the candied. So that's kind of what we see. Now you got green specks in your brittle.
Green specks are okay, just not a huge slab of, Oompa Loompa green looking weird food. That's odd.
Yeah, so I'm gonna let you know a little trick here, which is I cannot tell you the number of times I've had this conversation with people that have come into our factory and they want to observe our processes and they want to learn how to make chocolate and do all the stuff. And so I tell them, it's interesting if the ingredients taste good going in, they'll usually taste good coming out. Just don't screw them up, right? That's the kicker. So we wanted to make sure that what went into this brittle actually tasted good. Powdered jalapeno powder, Melanie didn't try that.
Nope.
She didn't try that one, but the candied jalapenos were just delicious. And so we knew going in we had this. And so we put this recipe together. We have a little AI tool that we use to help us kind of calculate, okay, to put us in the ballpark. And to be honest with you, I learned something that Chat GPT or whoever drives this model, it's way too conservative on temperature because it didn't.
Like the temperature of the pepper itself?
Yeah, it was way too, not for Texas, right? I mean, it's not TGBT, I can tell you right now, because the flavor that it came up with was not nearly hot enough. We didn't think. And so
you had to make it artisanal. That's where you had to really get involved and use your own taste buds and go, no.
Yeah. And actually, one of our staff, I'd said, we'll put like, I can't remember, like 4 ounces or so of these candied jalapenos in there. And it looked like a good amount. And the staff came back and said, no, we
need 3 pounds.
We need a pound. It was a pound. We actually put a pound and about 100 pounds or so brittle. And it looked like just a shit ton of jalapenos to me, but that's what we did. And the second thing is we don't want any water in brittle. So if you think about it, nuts all contain water, right? And then there's candied jalapenos in water. So we had to figure out a way to get the candied jalapenos in the brittle. But at the same time, we didn't want to introduce moisture into the brittle because then it gets sticky, right? So we had to almost start to treat those candied jalapenos as a nut. We had to put them and cook them almost like we were cooking nuts. But the problem there is we don't want to lose the beautiful flavor that we're bringing to the table. They had to be more than just an artistic element. So it took a little bit of practice and guessing and trying it out to know when to put those into this mixture so that we could evaporate most of the water, but at the same time, actually get it to land in the brittle and actually be flavorful.
Yeah. So long story short, now we have peanut brittle, spicy peanut brittle, jalapeno pecan brittle. No, we did peanut brittle the first time. Yeah. Now he's talking about adding pecan brittle. So we're looking at, regular and spicy and jalapeno, 2 different nuts so far, unless we can figure out another nut that we need to add some jalapeno to or other spice. Because jalapeno is not where it ends either. I mean, if they want spicy. I mean, we're talking about making a habanero ganache and different hot things. People want hot with sweet, which is weird as hell to me. Like, I don't get it, but whatever.
Well, the other thing that's interesting too is that this last year, our Google search has finally kind of hit mainstream, which has been fantastic. And so we get orders from all over the country. And what's been crazy is that a very, very popular order is brittle.
So, lots of brittle.
We do. Which is good. We're thankful for that. And we're really thankful too, because you don't have to refrigerate it when you ship it, which is kind of crazy, but compared to most of the chocolate, it's a lot easier to ship. But yeah, brittle has been really, really popular. So that's our story on how we got to a jalapeno brittle. And I don't know, Melanie, I can't talk you into trying it.
No, but people should buy it.
I really like that last point. Thanks.